Here now, Niall Stanage, White House columnist for our partners at The Hill. Niall, good morning to you. This dynamic between president and governor amidst a disaster, what are you anticipating to see today once Trump hits the ground there?
One of the things we've heard in terms of directly when he does hit the ground is that Governor Newsom has said he will be there to greet the president. Newsom also says he has not yet been invited to do so, so that could be an interesting dynamic to start off with. The broader political dynamic, Marni, I think is affected not only by the past in terms of Newsom and Trump's tensions, but also potentially the future, because obviously Governor Newsom is considered to be a frontline Democratic contender for the 2028 Democratic nomination. President Trump will be, of course, term limited out of office by that point, but I think Trump and Republicans writ large have an interest in trying to muddy up Newsom a bit.
Let's talk about FEMA for a moment. On the ground in these natural disasters, and we've got kind of a mixed bag. I talked to someone yesterday who said, I thought FEMA has been very supportive in North Carolina. They've shown up, they've offered aid, but you hear other stories of people who are still waiting for help. The cleanup continues, and it has been slow going. And Trump has been critical of FEMA. What do we know about not just North Carolina, but California and FEMA's role so far?
Well, in terms of North Carolina, that is perhaps the easier one to answer because obviously it's further in the past. So by last November, according to the then governor, Roy Cooper, there had been over $244 million in aid provided by FEMA to individuals. 9,000 or more people had been helped with temporary shelter, and there were 2,000 FEMA staff on the ground at that point. It's also worth noting that then candidate Trump said some things that were untrue about FEMA in that respect, suggesting, for example, that the pot of money it uses to house migrant families was depleting the pot of money for disaster relief, which is not true. Those are two separate pots. Now, that is not to say that FEMA or any government agency is perfect. Obviously, people have problems and have aired those problems as they're entitled to do. And I haven't inspected every individual complaint, of course, but there clearly are some out there.
What would it take to withhold funding from FEMA, as the president has threatened to do if they don't sort of meet certain expectations?
Well, it would obviously be very controversial, and it would depend if the president could get all of his Republican colleagues behind that. I mean, the principle behind FEMA is fairly simple in a way. It is supposed to come in when states would be overwhelmed, and because it is under the auspices of the federal government, the whole point is it is a pooling of resources that can then be dispatched to states that are afflicted by a disaster, rather than having those states have to constantly have everything in place for they themselves to respond. Now, it may be the case that some people would argue the states would be more nimble in their response. The danger is that a disaster of such magnitude hits that it overwhelms state resources.
Right. I mean, it's expensive no matter how you slice it. There are some reports, Niall, that aid to California specifically would be tied to a debt ceiling increase. What more do you know about that?
So this is part of the congressional horse trading in the building behind me, Marni. I think the intricacies of that would get very complicated and rather dull, but basically it is about some Republicans contending that they want aid conditioned upon Democrats agreeing to lift the debt ceiling. So they don't want no strings attached aid to California. They want a political give and take about something that they want and the president wants as part of that whole picture.
Got it. Well, first things first, he's heading to North Carolina. He'll see that damage, and then he'll head to California and see those wildfires and so much loss. Niall, thank you this morning as always.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.